Hello, I'm Chuck Barbie. Those foundations you see down there, and a lot more you can't see from here, are all that remain of the town of Old Kernville, aka Whiskey Flat. Fortunately, this beloved old town still lives on in the hearts and minds of those who knew her, those who lived there, as well as in the many stories told by people who have since passed on. And through the use of a little bit of movie magic, we can kind of recreate a feel for what it was like to live in the old town. So join me now as we go back in time, back to a wonderful place, the town of Old Kernville, the town that wouldn't die.
That was quite a town, boy, that old Kernville. It was a nice little town.
Well, Old Kernville was, there weren't too many streets, probably 4 maybe. The main one was with Bert James, and on one end, Bert James, then the Timmons, which was the post office.
Well, it was a real quaint little town. It was probably a population of about 150 people, and it had nice shady streets.
It was just a town where everybody looked after everybody else's children.
There was Bert James's store, and Jim Jennifer had a post office, and Bechtel had the dance hall, in which they had a dance every night, every Saturday night in Kernville. And the Brown Company had a big store on the corner.
It was a pretty lively town. There's a couple bars and 2 grocery stores, and they'd have a dance. Jim Bechtel built a dance hall.
Everybody went. You just simply didn't miss the dances. Part of the fun was the conversations that went on the next day by the telephone, you know. And everybody would review information they had about whether or not Don Hanning was there with his merchandise, and who went out to visit with Don Hanning. And Don Hanning was never apprehended for having run a still and came to the dances with his whiskey, you know. And somehow or another, if anybody found the feds were in the country, Don found out about it. Somebody told him, and he was always long gone.
A. Brown store, which I worked there. Then going up that street would be the A. Brown house, and then several others. Then on up to the schoolhouse.
The A. Brown store, I was there quite a lot. And the floors did creak in that store, but I remember it was all brick. And we'd go there pretty often.
Most of the houses had green picket fences around them, because in those days the Burlandos ran cattle, and they went through town at random in those days. So everybody had to be fenced. Cattle had the right of way.
Kids, we had a lot of kids in Old Kernville. As soon as they get old enough to rake leaves or do something, everybody would find a job for anybody. Clara was the oldest girl, and she and I were buddies. And we played hopscotch all the time out in the road. We drew the squares in with a stick, and it was not blacktop, it was just sand.
As a teenager, we had a club called Haven from Slavin, and we just had horseback riding, hay rides, weenie roasts, swimming parties, street dances.
Across the bridge, they had a big beach there, and everybody'd go up there and go swimming in the river. And they had a rope tied to a tree, and you could swing on the rope out into the river.
Of course, we had the river. I started to swim when I was very, very young, and my dad would tell me to stay out of the river, and of course I wouldn't. But anyway, I loved the river, I loved the little town.
Well, Don Hayne was one of the owner of the bar out there in Kernville called Hanning's Bar, and he owned one in Isabella, Hanning's Bar there, and he had a ranch and out there in South Fork, and he was a real good cowboy. Don Hayne was, but he was the one that did all the bootlegging in the country. He had all these stills all over the country, up here in the Kern Valley. And he had guys running them, and I don't want to say their names, but he had all of them running them, and then he'd haul every place you could go here, you could buy whiskey. In the garages or any place, you drive in a garage and tell them you want a bottle of whiskey, and they'd sell you a bottle of Don Haynes whiskey, which was good whiskey, and everybody got along all right on it.
The telephone company was located on Nellie Dent Street, across the street from Bert James' store. Also across the street was the post office, and so you saw everyone in town coming to get their mail, and that was a big social event of the day, was everyone coming to the post office to get their mail. And I don't know exactly how many people lived in Kernville proper. I'm guessing maybe 500 at that time.
The movie street in Old Kernville was false fronted buildings that probably ran about 2 city blocks. When they made the movie Stagecoach in 1938, they brought the road across the mountain. You can still see where it crossed over the mountain and down into town there. So they built that road down there just strictly for that thing. And it went right by the school, between the school, grammar school there, and the Methodist church.
The movies, oh, that was always great fun. It caused a lot of conversation and people talking about who did what for the movies, you know. Yeah, I remember one day I earned $7. I was standing in a crowd and all I needed to do was clap. So I think it was a 4th of July speech in the movie. And then all I had to do at the end was clap, and I got $7 for it, and I thought I was overpaid. I thought it was wonderful. What a salary. It was great.
We used to play in Movie Street as kids. Well, Mrs. Brown owned the Movie Street, she and Andy Brown. And she was always afraid that us kids would get hurt. So she'd catch us in there and chase us out every once in a while. And this one particular day, old William Boyd was up here. His double was riding this white horse down the street, and this girl was supposed to come flying out of the swinging doors of the bar room, and the cowboy galloping along the street was to reach down and pick her up and put her on the back. And so they tried 2 or 3 times and it didn't work, but finally she got up on the horse. But she was out of stride with the horse, and her behind was coming up about a foot off and us kids, we fell off the fence laughing, and old Hoppy came over and just chewed us out. He said, "You've spoiled a good scene. How did you know that wouldn't be a take?" So anyway, kind of took our fun out of our recess.
They were real good about letting us come watch if we'd be quiet. And they were very nice to us. And I saw many stars of yesteryear, mostly Roy Rogers and Dale Evans and Hopalong Cassidy. There were other big names like Humphrey Bogart and Andy Devine and different ones that came in later years. But they were real nice to we kids.
We had fun. Went to Kernville to the movie every Friday night. This truck that I haul cattle and stuff in, we'd hose it out good, and I'd load all those kids in and take them. And they had a blast. big day in the valley.
Well, when we first came to the area, a lot of the old-timers talked about that the Corps of Engineers had been talking about building a dam, but they said it had never happened. And that was kind of the sentiment of the people living in Old Kernville, that it was just talk. It would never happen.
Well, eventually it happened, but they wouldn't believe it was coming, even when they were buying up the land and doing the work to start the dam. My mother-in-law was one of those. She was a school teacher, taught in a school in Old Kernville. And she said, if they ever build that dam, the water will never come up to here anyway. And if it does, I'll go wading in it. Eventually, she had to wade in it.
I went to a lot of the town meetings, and they would meet with the Corps of Engineers, and the citizens would all go, and they'd start arguing and fussing about who wanted to go where.
Well, when the government offered to move the town site, they wanted everybody to move to the same location, and people didn't want to do it that way.
Some of the people decided that they'd rather go to Isabella or go to Wofford Heights. So finally the Corps said, well, we'll just fly you all out and you go wherever you want to go.
And that's what happened. They did. And the Kernville Development Company was formed to develop this particular site. And they did a fabulous job, actually. There weren't any trees in this area except along the river. And today, the town is well covered with trees, but at first, it was a pretty barren plot.